Okay, we're probably good to kick off here soon. Derek, you feeling ready?
Not too
Sure.
bad.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Derek Gunderson, and on behalf of the Northwestern Workforce Science Project at the Northwestern Center on Law, Business, and Economics, I want to welcome everyone. Got a great set of panelists today, and I probably saw a bunch of you at TALREOS. Just seems like it was, I guess it was about a month ago, a few weeks, I guess 3 weeks ago, but it was good to see everyone there. Looking forward to seeing everyone again next year. And it's now my pleasure just to turn things over to Deborah Weiss, Director of our Workforce Science Project. Deborah?
Thank you, Derek. And we're delighted to see you all here. Please put any questions you have in the chat, and Richard will get to them at the end. And as Derek said, feel free to network by putting your LinkedIn info in and connecting to each other. So with that, I would like to welcome our moderator, Richard Rosenau, who is the Vice President of People Analytics Strategy at One Model. In addition, he has been doing a wonderful service for the people analytics community for the last year or two with his listing of people analytics job, which I'm going to put in the chat in a minute. And these webinars offer an opportunity for him to take a deeper dive into how organizations are shaping their roles and responsibility in people analytics. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to him and our wonderful guest.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And a big thank you to the Northwestern Workforce Science Project for putting the series together and keeping us going. We're fully in year 2 of these now, which is really exciting because there's been a ton to learn. And Kierney, I've really been looking forward to this one. Kierney and I have met, we've known each other in space for a while now, but just getting a chance to share your story, hear what's going on at Eli Lilly. I know everyone's here is very excited to hear from you too. So without too much more ado, Kierney, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. This is really exciting, and thanks for inviting me to chat with you in this forum. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kearney Fulton. I am the Senior Director of People Analytics at Eli Lilly. I'm very, very new, especially considering the tenure that we see at Eli Lilly. I just started here in November, but I've been in people analytics pretty much my whole career, so this is nothing new to me, and it's exciting to be able to talk about my role, my team in here. But I do have to say that nothing that I say is a reflection of Eli Lilly, so I'm just going to say it out there. So just a fair warning.
That's totally fair. And no, Kearney, you're here representing yourself in the people analytics space, and all of us here really appreciate that. Just your openness and willingness to join in here. Could you tell us a little bit more about, like, how did you find people analytics? Because that's always an interesting thing, kind of how people come in from different places or find their way over here. Like, what was it that brought you into the people analytics space?
Yeah, so it's very funny. I came into people analytics before it was called people analytics. I think it was called like HR analytics way back when. And it was by happenstance. It was right around the time when the banking industry was being disrupted. It was when mobile banking and digital banking had started to take over how we bank and how we interface with our financial institutions. And so I was working at a small community, relatively small community bank based in Buffalo, New York. And they built their relationship with customers through in-person interaction. So with their community banks, they have a lot of branches throughout their footprint. And so because of how the industry had been disrupted with this technology, my manager, not really knowing my skill sets and not really knowing what to do with me, kind of threw me to the wolves and said, here's some data on the branches. There were about 750 branches in the footprint at the time, and said, build me a staffing model. And I had an economics background.
Incredible
and I
project.
Statistics, right? So, and I'm like, staffing model, I don't know what that is, but I knew economics. So I just kind of took off with it. That's how I learned how to code in SAS. I learned SQL pretty quickly because our database was in SQL. And then I built a staffing model. Kind of took it like a homework. I was straight out of school. And then I showed it to him, and he was like, whoa, I was kind of joking when I told you that, but this is actually really cool. And so we refined it, and we socialized that model to other leaders across the retail network. And I remember this is my first lesson in working with a stakeholder. I remember we were heading into a meeting with our market managers and with our regional managers, and he stopped me and he said, "Kearney, I want you to do one thing for me." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "Don't mention the word statistical significance in that room." Like not one mention of anything
Yeah.
statistics. And I'm like, "But that's how they know that the model works." And he said, "Nobody cares. Nobody cares. What they care about is how it affects the business, how it affects their branches, and how it affects their business. That's what we need to focus on during this meeting." And I said, "Okay, fine." And so that was my first year straight out of school in the banking industry. And after that, we implemented it, saved the bank a couple $1 million. Second year, they came back and said, "This is amazing. Let's do it again, but this time for relationship managers." And I said, "Okay, different inputs, different outputs. Let's do it again." Third year, they said, "This is amazing. Let's do it again, but this time for portfolio managers." But of course, portfolio managers, they're the ones that interface with customers. So this is becoming a talent management conversation. And so at that time, I was starting to get the reputation of being known as the staffing model girl, and I couldn't go into the branches without people like knowing me, and so like giving me like the worst customer service because they know me as the staffing model girl. And so I was like, "Listen, love this, love the data, but I'm done. I need to move on to the next phase of my career." What I did love was working with people data. And so that was when I moved on, same organization, but in HR analytics, and I haven't left since. So that was really my introduction to pigeonholing myself into people analytics. It's
That's
a fancy,
fantastic, though.
yeah, it's like a fancy word for workforce planning in banking.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and I think one of the big takeaways I have too in workforce planning, when you get really discrete like that to a particular line of business, a particular role, you can be incredibly effective. And a lot of times we try to do workforce planning against the entire ocean at once. And so just even hearing that kind of like early win, early hook. Yeah, Kearney, thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're over at Eli Lilly now. Could you tell us a little about Eli Lilly for people that might not be familiar, or our friends in the UK or other places, maybe they might not know Eli that well? Could you give us just a brief introduction and what attracted you over there?
Yeah. That's great. If you don't know Eli Lilly, you probably know Ozempic. And if you know Ozempic, one of its main competitor is Mounjaro. Mounjaro is being made by Eli Lilly. And if you know Mounjaro, you probably have also heard of Zepbound, which is the only FDA-approved weight loss drug in the market right now. And Eli Lilly is also the supplier of Zepbound. And Eli Lilly's history is very colorful and amazing and just wonderful. Just a history of drug making and helping patients live better. And so how I got into Eli Lilly is purely by luck, I want to say. I'm pretty much industry agnostic throughout my whole career. I mean, I started in banking and then I moved on to biotech because I wanted to move to Boston. Was there for a couple of years, and then P&G came calling. So that was right around COVID. I was in P&G for several years, and when they were implementing Workday, that was fun. My hat for people analytics grew smaller, and my Workday hat had started to grow bigger. That was an interesting challenge, and so I was kind of attracted into leading this amazing and talented people analytics team in a hospital system that was based in Dallas, Texas. But the culture just wasn't a great fit there. What I did love about my experiences is that I was getting a little bit of what I was looking for in each of the experiences that I've had. So, for example, when I was at P&G, I loved the culture. The culture was phenomenal. It's a very global organization, but it's like every time I met with somebody, they've been there for years. And I mean, like they grew up there. My manager at the time, she jokes around. She was like, "Oh yeah, I started here when I was a kindergarten." She's been there for like over 25 years, right?
Yeah.
And that's normal. That's normal for P&G, and it's shocking because it's a very global organization based in Cincinnati. So when I left P&G, it was a very hard decision. But I wanted to chase people analytics. I wanted to do people analytics. And that wasn't the company for me to do it, just because they just weren't ready for it. They were implementing Workday and they were going through a huge change management. So I moved to Baylor in Dallas, and I didn't get the culture, but the team was phenomenal. I mean, I've never felt so dumb in my whole life leading this team. I can tell you. I mean, I had a team member who was a physicist who had like 9 patents under his belt. I was leading a data scientist. My right hand woman, she was a maxillofacial surgeon. I mean, just very talented group of people. And the work was interesting, but the culture wasn't there. And so I told myself, you know what? There's a lot of people analytics job out there, as you well know, Richard, because you maintain that list for all of us. I don't want to settle. I don't want to settle at
Hmm.
all. And so next time I want to look for an organization that has a value that I align with a job that I can feel passionate about, with a culture that I can thrive in. And Lily just checks all the boxes, right? Lily is ready for people analytics. We implemented Workday in 2020. They've gone through stabilization, and now they're ready for what's to come, how to use the data in a consistent and advanced way. The culture is amazing, just amazing. I mean, of course there are pockets of the organization where it differs, but in general it's been an amazing, it's one of the best pharmaceutical cultures you'll probably hear about. And then of course the values, making lives better for patients around the world. I mean, who wouldn't want to be part of that, right? And so, I mean, I've only been here about 6 months, and I'm just loving everything. So I do know that that's something that's a move that I don't regret, and it's been an exciting 6 months. So I
Bernie,
hope
that's
that
so good
answers
to
your
hear.
question. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it definitely does. And as someone else who's moved around a couple times in a couple ways, and it's interesting that kind of wisdom you pick up from seeing kind of across, because I think that's one of the things that's really been helpful in people analytics, as much as I know some people have kind of belabored like people analytics leaders are moving a lot because the market was very hot there for a little while. The people analytics
Yeah.
leaders were shifting and changing. But we've really gotten some really nice cross-pollination of seeing what works, what doesn't work, what do I like,
Exactly.
what do I not like, and heading into this next phase of kind of people analytics maturity as a function, as a field. I think that's how you create strong leaders that kind of have that cross-functional view. And so I think it's positioned you well for where you are right now, Kearney. I'm really excited for you.
Thank you. And just learning from each other, right? I mean, you and I have talked about this. You know, we benchmark all the time with other people analytics leaders. You know, we've had my leader and I have benchmarked what it looks like to build the people analytics team, because it differs in other organizations depending on the culture of the enterprise, the priorities, all of that. And so really learning what that's going to look like for your organization, and that's going to look different everywhere.
Yeah, that's a great segue too, because I was hoping to hear a little bit about the structure and format of your team. But as you talk about benchmarking too, it'd be really helpful to hear, like, how did you go about thinking about creating that structure? I know it's a bit of like a meta question there, but that idea of you
Yeah.
benchmarked, you spoke to a lot of different areas. Are there certain places you went for resources that like were really fruitful, certain conversations that really helped? It would just be great to kind of hear if other people are on the call thinking about their people analytics team, what it could look like next. Like, how did you go about that research?
Yeah. Well, you and I talked, so that was a super helpful conversation. But really, my network, because
Yeah.
again, I've been in people analytics pretty much my entire career, so I've been in touch with other people analytics leaders throughout Boston. So we chatted with Rob King from Takeda. We chatted with some leaders from Insight 222, Heidi, who used to lead the people analytics team at Vertex, but is now in Insight 222. We chatted with her. We chatted with several other individuals, Noah from Biogen, but not just in pharma, right? We also talked to other people analytics leaders from other organizations like Campbell's. We talked to this small startup company in California. So we really wanted to understand what worked for them and what didn't work for them. We wanted to learn from other organizations the different skill sets they looked for in their people analytics team and how they leverage different specialties. And so when it came time for us to figure out what it is that Lilly needed, we were a little bit more informed on how to execute on it. What was really helpful for us was when we talked to you, Richard, and you've mentioned that there's this emergence of HR technology leaders in people analytics. And that's not something we've seen in the past, but in actuality, that's something that we already have at Lilly. So what it really is that people analytics at Lilly actually sits in what we call the HR technology and operations organization. And that means that my leader also owns HR Tech, which owns Workday. And because of that, we have the work stream supporting different COEs like compensation, benefits, etc. But they also support us as people analytics, which means that when it comes time for creating dashboards in Workday or discovery boards, people analytics team actually doesn't build them. We work on them in partnership with our HR tech organization. And in addition to that, we also have our HR solutions team, who, if you think about it, they're more like tier one, tier two solution and operations team. And they have a reporting arm that supports any reporting ad hoc requests from the enterprise, from the HR organization, which helps us because instead of being bogged down with all of these random, reporting requests, they resolve those for us. And so between those two expansion of teams, we're left with really just supporting the organization in in finding insights through our, through advanced analytics and making sure that we're partnering with our stakeholders and our business partners and making sure that all of the services that we provide are really analytics, not reporting, not business intelligence, but really that consultative, analytics that is very much needed and is in demand in our organization.
That's awesome to hear. And the what I'm hearing too, and what I'm seeing is that sort of like the HR ops team having reporting and HR tech having workday reporting could be a crisis in other companies, except you have that common leader to actually pull you all together, remove those political barriers, remove that friction, and suddenly it's a real asset for you. And it's interesting to see that shift. And that's really what we've been seeing in the market is that political leader over top of these teams, and they can pull that together in the kindest version of political. But it's that decision making and the speed is still there, whereas otherwise you could have been balancing and navigating a lot of cross-functional conversations. So that's fantastic to hear that's working out. Maybe a follow-up question for you, Kearney. The people analytics team specifically then, could you elaborate a little bit? What does that look like for you guys? And could you talk a little about how you designed that structure?
Yeah, so we knew that there's a lot of need for analytics across our HR organization, and we don't know if this is going to stay, 2 years from now or what have you. But as I onboarded into Lilly, one of the things that I've realized is that there is a lot of need for deep analytics across the different business units, right? Different business units and different COEs. And so we wanted to build that consultation model to have each of the business units and each of the COEs supported in the way that they need. Because again, they're asking different business questions from each other. They're looking at the data very, very differently. Our research and development team are focusing on something very, very different from what our manufacturing quality team are focusing on. Our talent management organization are looking into something that is going to impact our talent assessment or what have you. Our compensation team are looking into bringing gender pay gap analysis in-house, things like that. And we can't possibly have just one centralized people analytics team to try to answer all of them. We really need to have people on the ground consulting with each of these business units and COEs and being tied at the hip with them so that we're aware of the conversations that are happening and being there to understand what those questions are and answering them with the data that we have. I'm always my motto is always that we as people analytics professionals know the data really, really well, but we can't possibly know the business quite as well as the individuals who are working with the business every day. And so the success of any people analytics organization is in the partnership that we build with our business leaders, with our business partners, with our COE. That's very, very critical. And as I mentioned earlier, I started off my people analytics career really making an impact in the organization, seeing where my insights start and where impact happens. I think I've just gotten really spoiled with the fact that I see the one-to-one comparison, but I'm always in a mindset of if my insights doesn't help the business, what are we digging for it for? Right. And so that's kind of the structure that we want to build, is that each of those individuals will be supporting their own business units, their own COEs, so that they can be partnering with and building relationship with those individuals and really understanding the business as deep as they can, or at the very least having that consultation and open lines of communication so that they can support in whatever way they're needed.
That's super helpful. Yeah. And it's an interesting conversation with that, like centralized, decentralized, local versus central. There's a lot of those kind of navigating here. And I think the advice I've passed on to people is there's not one way to do it yet. As much as there are a lot of ways to do it, I think just being a new field and a new function, relatively new, giving ourselves some grace to try a lot of things and to try different things and to tailor that to our particular company. It sounds like you've been on the right path, learning, listening, and figuring out what's working for Lily. And thank you for sharing that. If I could shift just a little bit. So you were recently hiring for a few roles, and I think it sounds like you're moving along at the stages there, but it'd be great to hear about the process and maybe even a little bit of commentary on kind of like how the process is going in today's environment. Because we know there's a high volume, there's speed happening nowadays, but also just what was it like for people as they were kind of coming into the process? It'd be great to hear.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I also just want to say, I don't know if this is well, I do know a little bit what this is all about, but I've been asked to grow people analytics team in other organizations. For example, P&G and Baylor, but there's always this resistance to invest, right? There's always this resistance to grow the team, and I understand, right? We're in HR, we're not necessarily profit driven. There's cost to us, and Lily is quite honestly one of the only organization I've joined where, as I'm having these conversations with my leaders from the start, saying that we want this team to grow, we want to invest in this team, this is the bet we want to take. That's and huge. have actually gone ahead and said, here's the investment, go hire for them. And for me, that's a big deal. And that says a lot, right? Because it's one thing for you to tell a leader and tell her, you know, we're going to hire you to build a team and only give me one head count, versus coming to me and saying, we have a need, go hire for 6 extra people, right? And that's very different. And so as my leader and I were looking through what our team is going to be composed of, we really wanted to look into how do we meet the needs that are existing in our organization, and what kind of skill sets is needed to meet those needs. And so right now there's a lot of need for the technical skill sets, and I've been interviewing individuals in people analytics pretty much, again, my whole career, and there's this friction between the technical and the domain knowledge. And I think you and I have chatted about this. I've certainly talked about it with Rob, but on one hand, you get some really, really technical people who can code around you in their sleep. But on the other hand, you have HR practitioners who have domain knowledge like nobody's business, right? But where it gets really, really tricky and it's hard to find is the unicorn that has both. And that is really, really hard to find. And it's also really hard to discover, because nowadays ChatGPT can create your resume. So, I mean, you have to talk to people to really understand if they have both. And so it does make it hard for us to hire all of those open requisitions. But what I found is that there are certain things that we are prioritizing when it comes to hiring for our open roles. And one of them is the technical capabilities. It's not something that we currently have right now in the team. And so we want somebody who has the capability to code in R, who has experience in Python. We're currently building our data warehouse, and so people who can help me test, right? It's going to be in AWS or, you know, what have you, people who have experience in that. So I need people who are technical, and, you know, my leaders have even gone ahead and said the domain knowledge, we can teach that, but I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. So I'm still very optimistic that I will, and actually have found individuals who are technical and have the domain knowledge. And so because the requisitions have garnered so much interest from everybody, I have actually found some really great unicorns out there who have, you know, who I've talked to that are moving forward. Again, I've used my network. I was messaging you, Richard, as you know, when I was in the Maldives going, give me some IOs who can code. I messaged, you know, Rob, I've messaged everyone, all the other people analytics leaders, and said, you know, who's out there that's looking for a new role, right? But I'm looking for a specific profile, right? And that's really the key.
Oh, it's huge. And it's one of those kind of great debates in the field, is that sort of like, can you teach an HR person tech, or can you teach a tech person HR? And I was talking to somebody recently, and they were talking about how you kind of need like top 25th percentile in both. You don't necessarily need to be the best in each one, but having that domain knowledge in each, like there's some kind of balancing act there for optimization to be people and analytics, and kind of go across, or it's that portfolio of the team.
Exactly, because I don't want my team to go into a stakeholder meeting and start going on and on about statistical significance like I was going to do.
Yes, I've seen that. And I think too, the kind of underrated one is that, like, the ethical theory. I think there's some of that with HR, which is we can kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater sometimes and be like, just go all stats, all tech. But like knowing what to bring into what model and how things happen, and that grounding in the kind of like theory of why we're doing HR and what does this mean as a business unit, it goes a long way. So yeah, I think that debate's far from settled, but a really great conversation and great questions on that in the chat too. We'll have to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions here. So let me see. We bounced around a couple of my questions here. I think another one that I really wanted to make sure we touched on was how to gain buy-in. We've talked about this a little bit throughout the conversation, but I think that's something that, especially early teams and like kicking off, and it seems like you had a really wonderful sponsor that sort of this like industry-wide marketing we've all been doing about what people analytics is starting to kind of seep into new places. But as you've either gone to get buy-in at previous companies or as you're trying to get buy-in today, what are some tips you have to pass on to kind of other folk that are on the call that are trying to either build teams, grow teams, get the resources they need to go after buy-in?
Yeah. So it's funny because part of my onboarding was having conversations with all of these business partners and talking to them about what their needs are and looking for opportunities to partner. And as I'm having these conversations with them, I'm making lists of use cases, right? The art of the possible. And then I put them in this transformation map that now terrifies me every time I look at it because I know that there's a lot of work to be done and very little time for me to do it. But what it does do is display just how much the demand for our services are in the organization, right? We literally have over 40 use cases. Oh, it's probably more than that because I've just been adding onto it every day. Every time I talk to somebody, it's like, oh, can you guys do this? Can you guys do that? And I'm like, yes, but let me hire my team first, right? There's always going to be needs, and that's really the key, right? Is unearthing those needs and being able to share that with your stakeholders and saying, I could do these if I have the staff to be able to accomplish them with the skill sets that I need, right? And so that's one way for you to do it. But the second part of that is being able to take that and understanding what is the low effort and high impact use cases that you have and tackling those early on. Now, it's harder when you're also building a team and there's not a lot of people in your team right now to tackle even just the low effort, high impact use cases. So if you are able to tackle those, then by all means, that's one way for you to be able to gain credibility early on. But again, being able to prove that this is a worthy investment is really the key for the leadership team to continue investing in you. And then on top of it, going through and listing out which use cases can save the organization money, because again, we don't make profit in HR. I know that there are other organizations, and actually when I was at Baylor, the people analytics team sat in a centralized analytics and intelligence organization. So we had a little bit more flexibility there, although that had its own challenges. But we need to be able to make an impact on the organization in a different way. And if we are able to somehow impact the cost side of things, then we may be able to change the projection of what our team is going to look like, because more and more people are going to want that, right? And so that's some of the different ways you can get buy-in, but really showcasing the demand is very, very powerful. And every time I put up that transformation map, it terrifies me, but it terrifies others more.
No, that's super helpful. That idea of like collecting, pulling in, making sense of it, and prioritizing. I think about when I joined One Model, our chief product officer, Tony Ashton, I take hairball ideas to him all the time. Just like the craziest stuff. I'm like, what about this? Can we do that? How do we do this? And he always says, anything is possible. And I've learned that it sounds very positive, but what he's saying is anything is possible, but we have to pick one thing. We have to pick the thing we're going to go do. And that prioritization is just so critical to both product and people analytics to be able to understand what you're going after and the drive towards it. I think that's phenomenal advice. So we're stacking up some good questions in the chat. So I'll throw one more of my questions at you, then we'll break and we'll go into kind of Q&A off the record. But as a kind of final question, this is really open here, but what's ahead for the field? As someone who's been in the space for a long time, who's seen a lot of different teams, like what are some trends that are developing now that you're seeing kind of play out? Or what are some things you're planning for in the short term even for this new team that you've been building?
Well, short term, I need to hire these people because
And train
the
them.
information map is growing by the day, and I need to start onboarding some team members. So that's short term, but just in terms of when you ask me like that's actually one of the questions that you asked me that I'm like I don't know because it changes, right? I mean, who can predict that we'll be talking about the future of work back before when COVID wasn't even a thing, right?
Yeah.
But gosh, the reason why I struggle with it is because every day there are things that changes our industry, that changes our organization, and that comes with it very different challenges when it comes to people data, right? So, and this is public news that we're trying to catch up to the demands of the medicines that we put out there. So our manufacturing facilities, we're building 6 of them out there right now, and again, that comes with challenges on its own, right? How do we build workforce planning to sustain that in the long term, but also at the same time retain the kind of culture that we want for each of these manufacturing sites, right? That's not something that we've historically looked at within Lilly and really actively tracked, but that's something that we're going to want to do because the manufacturing organization makes up a huge percentage of our population. But again, it is something that is not new to just Lilly. I mean, this is something that I've looked at even when I was at P&G, right? Where manufacturing is such a huge percentage of the population. But I think what we'll start realizing is, as we move forward with these, as we get smarter with how we're looking at our people experiences, we'll be able to assess different experiences and not just the ones who want to advance their career and climb the ladder, but also the experiences of individuals in manufacturing sites, right? Because I think their voices have been muted for a very long time, but now because they're making up such a huge percentage of a lot of industries, it's becoming more prevalent nowadays, and they're becoming more important. So that's one thing. And then, of course, I'd be remiss to say if I don't say anything about, AI. I'm going to leave it at that.
We made
AI.
it 40 minutes. We made it
I
40 minutes,
know.
but no, it is. It's changing.
AI.
It's a great point you have though about listening, breaking out of corporate is maybe a way to, that's the note I wrote down. But this idea of like, I think a lot about workforce planning and workforce management. It
Yeah,
seems like workforce planning is for corporate and workforce management is for scaled populations. And like it might actually be the same discipline, but we've somehow created this like classist naming structure.
exactly.
And people
Exactly.
analytics likewise, like we do people analytics for corporate and then we do like workforce and like there's something else happening that like we
It's
should be better cross domain there.
It's very true, and just it's something that was so prevalent. It was my first experience working with a manufacturing site when I was at P&G, and it was just shocking because they have their own training team, they have their own recruiting team,
Yeah.
they have their own PVP, right? And that's insane because we all should be functioning under the same principles, values, and priorities. And yet,
Mm.
the manufacturing side has a completely different PVP than the corporate one. And to me, it makes absolutely no sense. We need to look at our personas differently and combine that together to understand who are our personas in general in our entire organization and understand that there are personas in the manufacturing site that would look kind of similar to some people who work in the office, right? And similarly, there are personas of talent in our back office who are also working in the manufacturing sites. So it's a really segregated way of looking at our data, which to me just never made any sense. Let's just look at all of our population as they are, and then break it out that way. I don't know. Maybe that's just my my way of looking at it. Just
No, I think it's a great trend, and I think it's one we're definitely seeing with that like total workforce view and like looking across the entire place for people analytics, because we should be doing analytics for everyone, not just a select few. But Kearney, phenomenal, really, really good talking to you. So nobody leave the chat yet, and everyone who's here live, you get to stick around. We're going to ask some Q&A, but we're going to go off the record. But for those of you watching the YouTube later or this video at another time, Kearney, thank you for coming on.
Of course, it's my pleasure, and you guys know where to find me.
Amazing. So Derek, let's turn off that recording, and then we will go off the record for this Q&A.